Welcome to our deep dive into truth and fiction. You ready to explore how we perceive the world around us? We've got some thought-provoking material for you today. A piece by Yuval Noah Harari, a fascinating audiobook, and a hidden brain episode that'll really make you think.
It's amazing how often we operate under what's called the knowledge illusion. We think we know more than we actually do. It's like assuming you understand all the intricacies of a combustion engine just because you can drive.
Yeah, we're going to
Mhm.
unpack that. Harari's piece really dives into this. It highlights how, in our hyper-connected world, it's almost impossible for anyone to truly grasp the complexity of everything. Take climate change, for example. We may discuss it, form opinions.
But how many of us truly understand the science behind those climate models? We rely on experts, on networks of knowledge we don't personally possess.
Right, and that's where the danger lies. We can easily fall into echo chambers. With our news feeds reinforcing existing biases, this false sense of knowledge can lead us to be overconfident in our judgments. Have you ever experienced this? Maybe in a heated debate, you found yourself clinging to a simplified explanation rather than delving into the nuances.
Well, our brains are wired for efficiency, naturally preferring quick and intuitive thinking. It takes conscious effort to engage in the slower, more deliberate thinking required for nuanced understanding.
That reminds me of the law of least effort from the audiobook Thinking Fast and Slow. The author, Daniel Kahneman, explains how our brains prefer shortcuts. Think about it. It's much easier to reduce the Syrian civil war to good guys versus bad guys.
Then to grapple with the intricate historical, political, and social factors that contribute to such a complex conflict. This tendency towards simplification can really distort our understanding of the world.
Yeah, it almost feels like we're living in a post-truth world. Yeah. This concept from Harari's piece got me thinking, is this truly a new phenomenon? Or have we always grappled with misinformation?
Hmm. Humans have always relied on shared narratives. Think about religious myths, national stories, even simple rumors. They bind communities together, even if they sometimes distort reality.
Harari brings up some compelling historical examples, like Soviet propaganda rewriting history, the centuries-old blood libel against Jews. These fake news stories shaped entire societies.
And we see this today. Certain narratives, despite being demonstrably false, hold immense power. They continue to shape perceptions.
Which begs the question, how do we differentiate between narratives that benefit society and those that lead to harm?
That's a difficult question. Even seemingly positive stories can have unintended consequences.
The biblical story of Adam and Eve, for instance, it might be fictional, but it has fostered compassion and a sense of shared humanity.
But then you have something like the fabricated story of Hugh of Lincoln, which led to the expulsion of Jews from England. This shows how the same narrative elements can be used to justify injustice.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by this constant influx of information, true and false. But don't worry, Harari offers some practical advice.
He stresses the importance of paying for reliable news sources and consulting scientific literature on matters important to you.
And remember the availability bias. This concept from Kahneman explains that our judgments are heavily influenced by information that easily comes to mind. If we primarily encounter emotionally charged stories and opinions, we might overestimate their accuracy.
We must be mindful of our sources, actively seek out diverse perspectives, even if they challenge our beliefs. It's tempting to stick with familiar narratives, but stepping outside those comfortable echo chambers can be enlightening.
Ready for another layer? Harari argues that science fiction often shapes our understanding of the future.
Think about how films like The Matrix have permeated our cultural consciousness. They spark our imaginations, but also introduce misconceptions. The way science fiction often conflates intelligence with consciousness.
This can lead to unfounded fears, like a robot uprising. The real challenges posed by AI might be far more nuanced and less cinematic.
It's crucial to remember that the future isn't a predetermined script. It's shaped by our choices and how we understand the forces at play.
And speaking of choices, let's bring in the insights from that Hidden Brain episode on moral convictions. They can be powerful catalysts for positive change. Think about the civil rights movement, people driven by their deep-seated beliefs, fighting for a better world.
But moral convictions, while powerful, can also lead us down unexpected paths.
The episode highlighted this perfectly. The debate over abortion, the harassment faced by Sandy Hook parents. We see how moral convictions can lead to extreme polarization.
This tendency to demonize opposing viewpoints can have real-world consequences, eroding trust and hindering meaningful dialogue. It can feel like navigating a minefield, truth and fiction all intertwined, our own convictions potentially blinding us. So how do we make sense of it all?
It's a challenge, isn't it? But maybe the key is something we often overlook: humility.
Acknowledging the limits of our own knowledge,
Yeah.
that's crucial. It allows us to be more open to new information, to different viewpoints, less likely to fall prey to that knowledge illusion we discussed.
But isn't there a danger in being too humble? If we constantly question our beliefs, won't we just be swayed by the loudest voice, the most convincing narrative?
That's where critical thinking becomes essential. Humility isn't about blindly accepting everything we hear. It's about approaching information with a healthy dose of skepticism, evaluating sources, considering different perspectives, and being willing to change our minds when presented with compelling evidence.
So it's a balancing act, humility and critical thinking. But how do we apply these kind of lofty concepts in our daily lives? We can't be fact-checking every headline or reading scientific journals on every topic.
True, but we can be mindful of the information we consume. Where do you get your news? Who are your trusted voices? Are you exposed to diverse perspectives? Or are you comfortably settled in an echo chamber? These are questions worth pondering.
Yeah, think about the last time you were in a heated debate. Did you genuinely listen to the other side? Or were you just waiting for your turn to speak? Were you clinging to your viewpoint? Or were you open to the possibility of learning something new?
Pay attention to your emotional reactions. If you find yourself getting overly defensive or dismissive, that might be a sign that your convictions are clouding your judgment.
Kahneman also talked about the halo effect. We tend to judge people and ideas based on first impressions. If someone seems charismatic, we're more likely to accept what they say, even if their argument is flawed.
Exactly. That's why it's crucial to be aware of our own biases and to actively seek out information that challenges our preconceived notions.
So maybe instead of seeking certainty, we should embrace the uncertainty. Instead of grasping for easy answers, acknowledge that the world is messy, that there's always more to learn.
That's a great way to put it. Embracing uncertainty doesn't mean abandoning the pursuit of truth. It means recognizing that truth is often complex and multifaceted. Our understanding is always evolving.
This brings us to a crucial question for you. How can you apply these insights to navigate this increasingly complex world?
First, examine your sources of information. Are they diverse? Are they reliable?
Then reflect on your approach to discussions and debates. Are you truly listening? Are you open to changing your mind?
And perhaps most importantly, ask yourself, am I genuinely informed? Or am I holding on to the knowledge illusion?
It's fascinating, right? We've been focusing on how external forces shape our beliefs. But what about the internal ones? Our emotions, our biases, the innate desire to see ourselves as good people.
Harari touches on this, arguing that even our most cherished values, like freedom or creativity, are shaped by evolutionary and societal forces. It's a complex interplay of nature and nurture.
He uses the metaphor of the matrix, not in the traditional sense of like an external system controlling us, but more like,
Hey, invisible forces that shape our minds from within, our perceptions, our desires, even our values are influenced by factors we may not even be aware of.
makes you wonder, right? Are we all just puppets dancing to the strings of our genes and our upbringing?
Not necessarily. I think it's more nuanced than that. Recognizing these influences, both internal and external, well, that's where true freedom lies. We become conscious creators of our own narratives.
Yeah. We're not just passively absorbing information, are we? We can choose which influences to embrace, which to resist, and which to actively challenge. It's an empowering thought, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We are all authors of our own stories, but we need to acknowledge the editors who've been working on the manuscript long before we even picked up the pen. Our biology, our culture, our personal experiences, they've all shaped the narrative.
That awareness is key. It allows us to be more conscious creators, more discerning consumers of information, ultimately more responsible citizens in a world that desperately needs critical thinking and nuanced understanding.
And that's the journey we're on. It's not about reaching a final destination, a definitive truth. It's about constantly refining our understanding, questioning assumptions, and embracing the complexities of the world around us.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought-provoking question. If, as Harari suggests, our minds are constantly being shaped by forces beyond our control, what does this mean for our pursuit of truth and justice?
It's a question worth pondering. Perhaps the first step towards an answer lies in acknowledging that knowledge illusion, embracing humility, and never stopping questioning the narratives that shape our understanding of the world.
And remember, this is just the beginning. If you're hungry for more, we encourage you to explore the sources we discussed today: Harari's piece, Kahneman's book, and that illuminating Hidden Brain episode. They'll offer plenty of food for thought long after this deep dive is over.
Happy exploring. And remember, the journey towards understanding is a lifelong adventure.